See it? Perfect. So, um, first of all, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I also want to congratulate Lex and Alicia. We've worked hard over the summer, and I'm proud of what the three of us have accomplished. But I'm going to go ahead and get started. Uh, My name is Antonio McElfresh. I am entering my junior year at the University of Oklahoma. I'm minoring in GIS and math, and my interests in meteorology include, synoptic scale forecasting, atmospheric kinematics, and I love aviation. So aviation meteorology is another one. Before this internship, I had a bit of experience building with AI, but not much. Our goal for this summer was to take artificial intelligence and see how compatible is it with real world weather data. So over the course of the summer, I made two projects. I'm going to start with SkyGrade, which was the our first 2 week project that involved smoke and air quality. So what I built is a browser dashboard that displays a sunset score, a derived sunset quality score that was built by Claude Code. And I'm drawing weather data from Wet Dog's Weather Terrier. And as you can see here on the right, these are the 5 layers that are used to calculate the sunset score. So clouds at all altitudes, smoke aloft, and surface haze. And then I also made sure to take into account the time of the year for the positioning of the sun on the horizon. So here's just a screenshot of the landing page. So I would say this was my first big win with AI in this internship because I was able to take existing data from Wet Dog and manipulate it to make a new data set. And at first, I was having hallucination issues. And again, this was only a 2 week project, so I didn't spend too much time on verification. But the fact that I was able to get a whole new layer, a whole new data set created was a big win. So here's some more brief screenshots. Over here on the left, you can see this is what the user will see when they click on a location. Um, these middle two screens are native Terrier layers. So at the top, we have air quality, and at the bottom, we have smoke aloft. And I just took these screenshots the other day. I was just in Montana, and it's pretty smoky up there. So cool to see that that verifies. Then over here on the right, this is just a brief screenshot of a much longer, much more detailed explanation page. With that being said, I'll start talking about the main project I was working on called Ruff Ride. So, when I was thinking about this project, I started asking people, my friends and family, a pretty simple question, but if you could book or change your flight based on your turbulence or flying condition preferences, would you? And most people said yes. If they could see a flight forecast before a flight, that could cause them to change their flight for a smoother flight. Um, so when I built Rough Ride, I did it in 3 phases. The first one was a browser version, which was similar to SkyGrade in a way. The next version is for the iPad operating system, which is supposed to be pretty similar to tools that pilots will use while they're actively flying. And then the last one is Rough Ride Passenger for iOS mobile. So this is a brief little video of the iPad version, just displaying some of the Terrier layers loading. So there's, like Alicia was mentioning, there's a ton of different layers. This is just a small handful of them, but as you can see, I was looking at wind. Here's precipitation totals. I also have cloud cover at all different levels, and this is a drawing from the GFS model. There's also the ability to see from the HRRR for that short range, high resolution. There's your real-time mesoscale analysis, and then, most importantly, radar. So at this point in the internship, um, I had, I guess I'd proven to myself that, I can take Wet Dog's products and build something with it. So I started thinking about how I could expand this. And that's when I really started turning the iPad version into something a pilot would use. So here are some pictures. For example, there's a flight plan section where the user can enter their flight plan. And then on here, they get all the information they need. They have all their, departure, arrival procedures, taxi charts, all that good stuff that a pilot would need while they're flying. And then there's another screenshot here of live flights. So the live flights and this flight procedures and everything that comes from the FlightAware API. And then over here is a screenshot of our conditions tab. So there's quite a bit going on here. But the main thing the main external data set that I got was NOAA's graphical turbulence guidance model, the GTG. So that gives you turbulence data, any altitude from 0 to 45,000 feet, up to 18 hours in advance. So you can see that on here. I have other options that are toggled off, but pilot reports, those are pretty useful because you can click on them and see live reports of the turbulence that they experienced. Um, METAR station plots, so you can see the general, flow. And then there's also the ability to toggle radar. Next, we're going to go to Ruff Ride Passenger. So Ruff Ride Passenger is designed to be for people who, if people who wouldn't know what they're looking at if I gave them the iPad version. So all the data that's drawn is still the same as the iPad version, but it kind of all happens in the background. So the core idea is a user can come on here, they can enter their flight, their date, and hit find my flight. And they can choose from their flight, and then it'll open a page where they get a flight forecast. So you can see up here, it's a score from 0 to 100. There's also a confidence score based on how far out the actual flight is. And then here is a 2D vertical profile of the expected turbulence during your flight. Then I also went ahead and added some extra features, just like delays, where is it slow? Um, there's also kind of like a delay forecast. I haven't really verified that yet, but if delays are getting worse or better. And then this feature is one of the bigger features where you can enter your flying preferences and find flights that fit your preferences. So right now, I only have a forecast loading for the first few flights because it would be pretty expensive computing wise to do all the flights for a single search. But the user can go in here and they can set their preferences and find a flight. And then I do not have a picture because I'm still working on it yet, but similar to what Lex has done with her social side, I'm also planning on implementing a social side to this app. So users can share their flight and they can be like, this felt like this, this was pretty rough. And they can post the flight score for their flight, things of that nature. And I've actually been on a few flights since I've been making this. So I've kind of been able to somewhat verify it live, which is pretty cool. I would say, if a comfort score of 70 or higher is generally smooth. Yesterday, I flew from Bozeman back to Dallas, and I had the comfort score before the flight was a 50, and that was, pretty moderate turbulence. It wasn't anything extreme, but that's kind of a good benchmark, I say. But now, how did I actually make all of this? So first thing I'm gonna direct you guys to is these two screenshots right here of just my general, Claude dashboard. I used OpenAI and Anthropic tools, ChatGPT, and a tiny bit of Codex but mainly used Claude Code and Claude Design. So up here on the left, this is just brief amount of my conversation history. And the reason I put that there is to show that, anytime I had a question or I wanted to implement a feature, no matter how big or small that feature was, I would start a new conversation with AI. And that helps because if you keep asking questions in one single conversation, the context window keeps growing and it'll lead to worse outputs, potential hallucinations. So overall, it's better to just do new chats. Um, and then providing the AI with context was, that was the biggest lesson I learned because it took me some time to get Terrier working properly on my first SkyGrade product. But then once I started building the other products, what I did was I directed Claude Code towards my project folder for SkyGrade, and I told it to investigate, how did you manage to get Terrier working properly? And by doing that, it was able to recreate it a lot faster and more efficiently on on my new products like Ruff Ride. And then my general workflow, I would start by brainstorming. This was either me just brainstorming on my own or maybe talking with ChatGPT for ideas. And then I would take those ideas, give them to AI. I would usually give it to Claude Code since I was using the Claude Code app and Claude Code lives inside of the project folder, so it always has context of your project. So I'd kind of ask it, is this plausible? How's this going to work? Stuff along those lines. And then once I was happy with that, AI would make the changes, and then I would review. Um, Now, this last little slide, I was curious. So I went ahead and I asked Claude, how much, how many tokens did I use making Rough Ride Pilot, the iPad version? And I'm not sure how accurate it is or not, but from what it looks like, had I not had the $100 month subscription, I would have been paying $342 in API costs. And I rarely hit my rate limits with the plan that I have. Um, so, I could have definitely taken more value out of that. But I guess the lesson is the subscription plans are definitely worth the value. Model wise, I did use Fable a lot. It's very powerful. It's also quite expensive token wise. But once Anthropic released that to the public, that's kind of I started using that and I was getting pretty good results. Um, but with all that being said, I appreciate your time and attention, and I'll open the floor for questions.
So Tara's had an interesting question. Does this take into account the airframe when you calculating the smoothness score? Because a prop plane versus a 747 will have very different feels.
Yeah. So I know for the book flight section, there's an option where you can select, if you prefer a bigger plane or a smaller plane. Um, Now, I'd have to go, I'd have to ask Claude if it takes that into account for the actual flight forecast, because it does have the plane, the body information for the plane, if I search up a flight. Um, so there's a chance that it could, but that's definitely something that if it doesn't, that should be implemented.
Wonderful. And there was also a question about how feasible it would be to integrate SkyGrade into RuffRide for the
Mm.
sunset.
I mean, it shouldn't be hard. I mean, I think I could do it. I just need to find a way how to, separate the two, but still have it in the same product. Like maybe, I don't know, maybe doing something like how nice is the sunset going to look on your flight? Something like that. Who
Yeah.
knows? Um, but but it's definitely possible for sure.
And how do you see that this would could improve the flying experience for travelers?
Well, I mean, we have forecasts for everything, right? You can open your phone and see your 7, 10 day forecast, whatever. But when you're booking a flight, you don't get a forecast for your flight. You can't you can't choose to be on a smoother flight. If you're a meteorologist, you can forecast yourself and do that. But for the general public, they're not going to know what conditions they have on their flight. So, the goal in the long run is to provide passengers, with comfort, if they're anxious flyers, knowing that their flight has a good chance of being smooth. And then, on the business end of things, airlines could technically charge more for smoother flights. So just things of that nature. And there's not really many apps like this that I've found. So definitely something that I want to probably keep working on, seeing how far I can take it. So